Hey, I'm Holland with Memphis Public Library, and welcome to Community Art Academy with our partnership with the University of Memphis's Art Education Department. Today we're learning about comic strips, and we're going to read Drawn Together by Min Lee and Dan Santat. So the grandson and the grandfather speak two different languages. So the grandson doesn't understand what his grandfather is saying. But the grandson says, "So, what's new, Grandpa?" He says, "Can we watch something else?" The grandpa looks at him. Grandpa pulls out a sketchbook. "Right when I gave up on talking, my grandfather surprised me by revealing a world beyond words. And in a flash." We see each other for the first time. All the things we could never say come pouring out. And when we build a new world that even words can't describe. But just when we're closer than ever, that old distance comes roaring back. This time, I am not afraid. Because I know that together, we can make our way across. Now, after years of searching for the right words, we find ourselves happily speechless. The end.
All right, thank you, Holland. That's a wonderful story from Drawn Together. We have a few concepts tying in with that story that we want to share with you guys today. I'm Jessica Branch. I'm a teacher.
I'm Jennifer Martin. I'm also a teacher, and we are graduate students at the University of Memphis in art education.
Okay, and so we've prepared for you today a couple of different tasks that I think would work well with your toolkit. Starting with, because we thought, that the story of Drawn Together was so symbolic of one of the leading protagonists. And we're going to talk about a little bit of the vocabulary in that story. But first, I just wanted you guys to feel empowered, because what you noticed in that story was that the grandfather and the grandson had an issue. What was the problem in that story? Can anyone tell me? Okay, well, the first initial problem in that story was that the grandfather could not communicate with the grandson. So, and I thought that was really interesting because, sometimes we feel like we can't meet, we can't do the best, we are not performing to the best of our ability. So, and I thought it would be really interesting, and Jennifer thought that it would be really interesting to empower you guys to feel empowered by you being able to out there to create your own superheroes, just like the characters in that story did. So we prepared a few things for you guys today. And Jennifer's going to take us off.
Sure. So in the story Drawn Together, you'll notice they have these dynamic photographs that go off the edges, which we love. But then you'll also notice that there are some more pages where you have more contained and your information is in frames. Do those frames remind you of anything? They kind of look like comic strips. So we are going to make our own comic strip today. We're going to start with our superhero and then move into a comic strip. But first, what is a comic strip? Have you guys ever seen a comic strip before? I don't know if you know, but we have a local paper, the Commercial Appeal, and every Sunday they have a pullout of comics. So if you guys have never seen one, this is a great place to look. You can see a whole variety here of different comics. And a comic strip is just a story being told in frames, and it's still important to have your plot, your characters, all the same information as you would in any story. So from a comic strip, you can move to a comic book. Here's one I picked up, and the difference here is a comic book is a longer comic strip, and it's usually in a series. We have several up here that you can see, but it's not the whole story in the book. It's just a section of the story. So they keep you coming back every month or every couple weeks to get the latest edition so you can find out what happens. And then moving on from that, we have a graphic novel, and this is a great one called New Kid. And so this is the entire story. It's a very, very long comic strip, all in one book. All right.
And so we wanted to highlight a few different artists if you guys were interested, just knowing about them. But we, like Jennifer mentioned, we have a few different comic strips. Like some of you guys are familiar with Marvel and DC Comics, which I'm hoping that you guys will be able to take a look at in the library. But we also have Royal Lichtenstein, which is good for art history, but he really highlights the kind of the imagery that is oftentimes used in comic strips. So that is a really good starting point. But I prepared for you guys today, and we have some prepared for our 8-year-old group, and to our six to up to 8th grade, your group, where you guys will be preparing and answering 4 questions. And so you'll be answering the 4 questions, which is located in the slide. And the 4 questions is that what my superhero name is, what your strengths are, my weakness, my goal is to. So that way you can create a superhero profile, okay? So this is a good example of a superhero profile that I created for you guys today, so you can take a look at that. But you want to answer those 4 questions in that superhero profile, okay? Yes.
Okay, so some of you registered with the Memphis Library and you got this blue bag, and in it are some of the supplies that we're going to need for this project. So you should have colored pencils, drawing pencils, an eraser, a pencil sharpener, white drawing paper, and then also some scratch paper, just any paper that you have in your house for doodling. You'd like a black felt tip pen or a black marker, and then a ruler. And then for those of you that want to go a step further, pull out your watercolors and some water, your paintbrush, and some paper towels.
Yes, because this goes back to illustrating techniques. You definitely can use watercolor first and use color pencil after it dries at the end. So it's a really good, awesome technique that you guys can use, and which I've done a little bit here for you guys with that one. And so next is going to take us down, and first I wanted to make sure that you guys were clear on who's the protagonist, because that's going to be your protagonist that's going to go into your comic strip. And so we're going to take that, and let's go ahead and define what a protagonist is. Slide 1. A protagonist is the leading character or one of the major characters in a drama, movie, novel, or other fictional text, okay? And so when we often see a protagonist, he's often partnered with an antagonist. And who's the antagonist? The antagonist is usually the villain But you know, in the going back to drawing together, there was no antagonist. It was a supporting character, which was the grandfather in this book. Okay. All right. So going back to we have our character development, and so that you have that, you answer those 4 questions. Make sure those questions are answered so that you create your superhero profile. But next, we're going to have our comic strip. Okay, and in the comic strip, you know, so you're going to be creating a story structure, and the 3 points that I wanted you to know in slide 1 of the story structure slide is that you are having to pinpoint what is the problem, what is the climax, and what is the solution. Those are the 3 points of the story that I feel like you should highlight today in your comic strip, okay? And I've done that here for you in this comic strip, okay? So I have the problem, okay? And I let me go ahead and list off to you what I created. This was basically going back to your profile. So if you created your superhero profile, this will go seamlessly into creating your comic strip, okay? So if you answer these questions, what my superhero name is, and I answered mine. Mine is Zoo Girl. My strengths are shape-shifting. My weakness is hamburgers. My goal is to defeat all the evil villains that are trying to kill and capture all wild animals. Okay, so Zoo Girl. Okay, and so going back to Zoo Girl, let's see what she does. So basically, there's a new burger, bison burger, on the market, and she's like, who in the world came up with this? So she's like, oh my God, I will get to the bottom of this. She finds the poacher, and so she's like, got him, and she puts him in jail. Okay, this is an illustration of a very simple comic strip that has a problem, a climax, and a resolution. Okay, so that's very clear for you, and you guys can get as complicated as you want. And I have some student examples right here where they've done a 5 to 4 panel comic strip. This is for the older kids if you want, but if you're young and you feel like you got a dynamic story that you want to tell, definitely go for it. These are a few that I've pinpointed. They're with 5 to 4 panels, 6 panels. Go for it, and it doesn't have to be wordy and verbose. Just tell the story through imagery. Okay, that's what we're wanting you guys to pinpoint. Okay, and so Jennifer.
All right, so back to developing your character. Jessica provided those questions for you, and for some of you that may be more than you can handle, but I don't want you to be intimidated. You can start with your superhero with some basic simple shapes. So I created my own little superhero here, and this is my mom, and she is like super grandma. And so when you think of a superhero, I know you guys are thinking like Batman or Superman, but it can also be an everyday citizen. So, and especially during the pandemic, you guys may have noticed some people going above and beyond to make the world a better place for all of us. So like healthcare workers or sanitation workers. Well, my mom was one of those people. She just had all this fabric, so she started to make masks, and she donated them to the healthcare workers and family and friends. And so here you have Super Grandma, and she was just made with a circle as her head, a basic triangle shape for her body. Even I gave her a cape. I just did a triangle and then added some wavy lines to it. Her feet are just half circles. Eyebrows and eyes are just half circles as well, and then rectangles. And of course she's wearing a mask, which is also a rectangle. And something else your character might want is a prop, like a mallet, or maybe they have laser eyes. Well, this character, of course, has a needle and thread, and I kind of exaggerated that so you could see it. But I don't want anybody to be intimidated by the scope of this project. Anybody can do it. Just start with your simple shapes.
Yes, and that's good for like the 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds to 8-year-olds to start with simple shapes.
Yeah. All right. Would you like to talk a little about Liechtenstein?
Sure.
All right. So when we started out, we were talking about comic books, and so one of my favorite artists is Roy Lichtenstein, and he is what is considered a pop artist. And he went and looked at popular culture, comic books, cartoons, advertisements, and that's where he got his inspiration for art. So in the 1960s, he really started with these large scale pieces that were based off of comic books. So here's one of those now. And he wanted his artwork to look like it was mechanically produced, so he looked toward newspapers to see how they printed their artwork. So this is made with all of these dots of color, and they're called Ben Day dots, and they were invented by Benjamin Day, and that's how they got their name. But his work has all these tiny dots that were hand painted. So, and speaking of pop art, let me just show you a couple more people that I love. Close up of this, but this is Andy Warhol's Campbell soup cans, and it's popular because it's just Campbell soup that you had in your closet or your pantry. So, and he created art based off of that. And then Klaus Oldenburg, these are the flying pins, these giant bowling pins, a bowling ball that they made in the Netherlands.
Well, that concludes our project for you guys. I hope that was really thrilling and interesting for you guys, and I'm pretty sure that you're going to be able to create some really dynamic pieces at home.
Yes, but before we go, so any supplies that you got, if you received a blue art bag, you can put everything back into your blue art bag, but any bag at home will work, or if you have a box. And more importantly, if you have siblings or pets, be sure that you're storing your artwork and your art supplies away from them.
First things first.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that concludes our lesson. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and feel free to head to the library and check out any of these books and practice, practice, practice. That is the best way to improve.
Yes.
Thank you.